Disclaimer.
You know what? F it. Let's talk about Star Wars. Star Wars is something special to everyone, and I'm no different. For me, Star Wars is that partner that made dating fun again for the first few dates before we had that weird, semi-incoherent bender and tried to patch things up until they threw a brick at me.
And yet I keep crawling back like a crack fiend.
So after the whiplash-inducing roller coaster that was the sequel trilogy, where they called it that when there was never a third one? Of course I jumped on one of the only offerings available during the launch of Disney+, The Mandalorian. For anyone who's just stumbling on this video with neither context nor the care for spoilers, in The Mandalorian we follow a talented bounty hunter known as the Mandalorian, or Mando, as played by Pedro Pascal, who hails from an ever-shrinking group of people who've made a religion out of combat. Mando is commissioned by the Bounty Hunters Guild to retrieve an asset for a group of remnant Imperial sympathizers, still licking their wounds after the fall of their galactic empire. However, when he discovers this asset is a child with strange abilities, he breaks his code of honor to protect the orphan at all costs. Now, in a past life about 6 months ago, I used to post media reviews on a blog, in written form. That was until I realized most Americans refuse to read out of spite for their 7th grade English teacher, isn't that right, Miss Meringue? You all read the title of this video, but before I get into my controversial takes on Season 2, I gotta give y'all the rundown on my thoughts on the first season. Now, before we move on, I want to make things incredibly clear. From here on out, there are going to be spoilers for the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, so I don't want to see any of you spoiler Samuels from here on out.
Okay, let's talk about Season 1.
With the utter turmoil the Star Wars community entered since the winter of 2019, it was surprising that post-Disney acquisition Star Wars managed to create a product that's more enjoyable than not. The first season of The Mandalorian brought Star Wars back to what made the original film successful. Simple stories with a solid sense of world building and a healthy influence from classic westerns and samurai flicks. You don't need to memorize every page of the Star Wars fan wiki before watching this show, as outside some connecting bits of history, Season 1 works independent from the rest of the Star Wars canon. Almost everything you need to know will be hinted at, if not divulged in full, throughout the season's runtime in a way that doesn't make you feel like you're back in your 7th grade civics class. Man, a lot of insults for 7th grade today, that's a little bit weird. In many regards, The Mandalorian finds success in giving tropes from older genre stories a Star Wars reskin. Much like Netflix's Breaking Bad film El Camino, The Mandalorian plays off the tropes of classic westerns in an effective way. Although unlike El Camino, which I found fine but skippable, Mandalorian's first season is, in my opinion, a phenomenal place to start your journey through the world of Star Wars. Between his short, snappy dialogue and insistence on keeping his face hidden beneath his helmet, the titular Mandalorian is effectively Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name in space. However, where Mando differs from Manco is simple. The Mandalorian wears his moral compass on his sleeve much more obviously than Eastwood's classic character. It's far from innovative, but if it works, it works. Additionally, elements of The Mandalorian call back to samurai films. The clearest parallel this season comes from Episode 4, Sanctuary, which derives its plot from Akira Kurosawa's classic film, Seven Samurai. And speaking of individual episodes, part of what made Season 1 so beloved,
beyond being based on one of the most highly successful IPs of all time,
is how the story of each episode plays into the general plot of the season. The ultimate goal of The Mandalorian through Season 1 is to settle down with a child on a planet safe from the rage of the Bounty Hunters Guild and the embers of the Imperial Army. As a result, the season manages to successfully utilize the episodic format in a way that makes small, easily consumable episodes part of a grander narrative. Of the 8 episodes produced for the first season, the weakest episodes are episodes 5 and 6, titled The Gunslinger and The Prisoner, respectively. I would argue that looking just at Season 1, both of these episodes are barely connected to the overarching plot of the season, bogging down a good 25% of this season with filler. The 5th episode is especially egregious in this regard, taking our characters out to the desert wastes of Tatooine yet again for some good old-fashioned fanservice that, quite frankly, few normal people asked for. And where the 5th episode feels like its only redeeming quality is the fanservice, Episode 6 at least exists as a fun little jailbreak romp that puts Mando's character growth in the spotlight. It's hard to imagine Mando hanging out with these criminal caricatures, and that further puts into perspective how much he's grown from his off-screen past to now, and that's without considering the character growth he's gained this season. But truthfully, prior to Season 2, anyone could skip Episodes 5 and 6 with almost no consequence to the plot of Season 1. So overall, the first season of The Mandalorian presented a solid show that benefited from its simplicity and independence. Which leads us to
Season 2.
Alright everyone, we've got a season of The Mandalorian in the bag. Nearly all the fans love it, and we've made more Star Wars fans with it. Folks especially love all these new characters that aren't connected to any of the previous stories. So anyway, writers, the possibilities are endless. What should we do for Season 2?
We should bring back old characters for fan service.
Could we wrap episodes and plots designed to set up new spin-off shows?
Well, what if we went back to Tatooine again? Those are all brilliant ideas! No one will hate that at all! Yeah, so, I've got some problems with Season 2, and to get you to understand where I'm at with The Mandalorian, I gotta run by how my feelings towards the season evolved episode by episode, so bear with me here. Episode 1. Oh, goody goody, we're back to the shithole sand planet again. It's only been, what, the 8th freaking time now? Well, I guess someone at Disney heard me call last season's Tatooine episode super skippable, and decided they had to make it super unskippable or something by coming back to this planet yet again. Look, let me be honest here, beyond my annoyance with going back to Tatooine again, this isn't a terrible episode. In fact, it does a lot to build out the world of Tatooine in a way that's interesting and dynamic. It makes the planet really interesting seeing all these different factions experiencing culture clash. And it helps that it's all wrapped up in a classic fantasy quest of slaying the slumbering dragon, and it's done very well. But you see, my problem and the general annoyance I have with this episode is, we've been to Tatooine so many damn times that I just could not give less of a damn about this stupid planet anymore. If we had gotten some great world building like this for last season's Tatooine episode, I wouldn't be as mad. But at this point, having this episode show off solid world building for the planet of Tatooine just goes to show that last season's visit to this planet was just a load of fan service member berries. Oh, wait, hang on a second here. Disney, don't you do that to me. You know that I think Boba Fett's a useless, overhyped action figure of a character. Don't you just— Oh, thank God it's just some other dude. Well, I mean, aside from those general annoyances I had, this episode's fine. It's alright. It's not the strongest episode to premiere a season with, in my opinion, but it's fun at least. Oh, wait. Let me make a Google search before I jump to any conclusions. Hey, Michael! You're a cocksucker!
Episode 2.
So the second episode of Season 2 is basically the Star Wars equivalent of Alien, which I don't entirely hate. My only major complaint is that this episode, as well as the last episode, kind of feels like filler, and when the first 2 episodes of your brand new season both feel this weak, that's, not a very good sign. It feels like these first 2 episodes were born more from a need to make last season's skippable episodes unskippable through heavy connections to those past adventures. Which, I'm gonna be real here, probably should have been lower on the priority list if I'm being honest.
Episode 3.
Alright, now we're finally getting into some plot here. Although it's at the cost of something Disney absolutely adores. Brand synergy. For the uninitiated, here's a quick little lesson. Synergy is a term kicked around in corporate circles as a catch-all term used to refer to how the many moving parts of any company plays into the general image of the brand. Ugh, gross. When this term is used in reference to the Disney company, it generally refers to how Disney likes to use cross-promotions and tie-ins to boost brand awareness, basically turning their products into advertisements for other products. You know, you could sort of call this something like a, Disney brand expanded universe. The Disney brand loves to employ this to ensure that your money keeps getting funneled into the company. So what does all of this have to do with The Mandalorian? Well, everybody, allow me to introduce you to Bo-Katan. Bo-Katan is the head of a section of Mandalorians who feature heavily in both the Clone Wars animated series and its sequel series, Star Wars Rebels. Huh. So that's why Disney gave Clone Wars that final season they had no prior interest in producing, huh? And sure, the appearance of this Mandalorian heir is very obviously a brand tie-in, titty armor and all, but at least it provides some actual content to the season. Bringing in a group of Mandalorians with a different cultural understanding of their culture provides massive insight on how Mando was raised with a warped perspective on the world, which plays further into his character development this season. With this fresh perspective, Bo-Katan also brings a fun mission that involves hijacking an Imperial ship for weapons to help them take back the planet of Mandalore. And of course, the ship leads us to those Imperials who come in full force this season.
Haha, get it? Force like Star Wars, cause it's a pun. Ha!
I really enjoyed how the first season of this show depicts the imps exactly as what post-Reich Seasons are. A bunch of sniveling, megalomaniacal authoritarians clinging to the past regalia of a violent regime doomed to fail in the hopes, no, the utmost belief that their return to a seat of power and glory is an inevitability. And despite them being so utterly pathetic, the only reason they pose a real threat to society is that what few numbers they have are violent to a fault, ready to slaughter anyone and everything preventing their quote-unquote truth from becoming a reality. That fanaticism is further explored in this season, starting with this episode, making the parallels to more contemporary Nazism and white supremacy far more apparent. Let me be frank here, the second that Commander What's-His-Name pulled an electro-suicide tooth a la cyanide pills, which the Nazis did for real in case you weren't aware, I knew we were in for something more from the imps this season. And to be totally frank, it's effective, at least on me. Every little parallel drawn to the Nazis this season only made the once comically incompetent empire all the more threatening, especially in the recent wake of widespread white nationalist movements proving to be a legitimate political threat.
Episode 4.
We're heading back to Navarro this episode, and it's a great episode in the wider context of this series. To return to this planet and find its once slummy community now thriving upon eliminating the aforementioned space threat gives a very obvious and clear message that Nazism is bad, which if that's too political for you, I will happily redirect you to Nazis Are Bad 101, an introductory class for 4th graders. Though with that being said, there are a few things I noticed this episode which I couldn't help but let creep into my mind. The confirmation that the child was being harvested by the imps for cloning experiments feels like a retroactive justification for all of these Snoke is a fearless who needs to walk little memes that I keep seeing everywhere for this movie called The Rise of Skywalker, which, guys, that movie doesn't exist. You need to stop acting like this meme is funny. And once again, we get the return of that X-Wing fighter guy, which that feels like it's a bit of a setup for something. There's no way that this guy's in both episodes for nothing, right? And most pressingly, it's around this episode I started to notice something interesting. It's true that Season 2 of Mandalorian is comparable to the quality of Season 1 at this point, but for some reason it just wasn't resonating with me the same way the first season did. And I think now that I'm doing this personal retrospective, I think I figured out exactly why that is, and it's not what you would expect. Remember earlier when I was recapping my feelings on Season 1, and I said that Season 1 utilized the episodic format in a way that makes small, easily consumable episodes part of a larger narrative by making any episode feel like Mando could have a potential solution to his problem? Well, it feels like the writers tried to do this again with Season 2 here, but it's not as effective, and I'm gonna tell you why. In Season 1, the overall plot and goal of the entire season is to find a planet that is safe enough to raise the child on. Since nearly every episode in Season 1 features Mando traveling to a different planet, almost any episode could have Mando finding what he wants. Meanwhile, the major goal for most of Season 2 is to find a Jedi who will train the child and keep him safe. The problem with this is, up until the end of Season 1, the idea of the Force and Jedi were all but a myth to Mando. So a majority of this season is effectively chasing this purple dragon, searching for a mentor sorcerer that may or may not even exist, let alone be willing to help. Yeah, we the audience, us people who have seen the Star Wars, know that Jedi are a real thing, and they're all thriving despite the best efforts of some, but Mando doesn't know that, so this mission feels more like a mission for us, the audience, rather than for Mando and the child. It almost feels like the writers are teasing the fans into asking, ooh, what famous Jedi is going to train the child? A question which realistically only has like 3 possible answers that would be satisfying. And that's if last episode's Ahsoka Tano name drop doesn't pan out. Which, speaking of which, that leads us to
Episode 5.
I can't lie to you guys, I like this episode. It gives off big Yojimbo energy, and I like that a lot. I can't help it. I'm a self-proclaimed film connoisseur, so any reference to the films of Kurosawa are gonna make me nod in contemplative silence. Outside of seeing that Thrawn name drop as yet another example of synergy and potential spin-off bait, I really don't have anything else to say about this episode as far as a critique or review is concerned. It's really hard to mess up a good spin on a classic Kurosawa picture.
Episode 6.
I'm not gonna lie, this episode was one where I was expecting the season to drop off in quality, but it wound up surprising me a lot. Look, I've been saying this for years. I've always thought that Boba Fett was a useless action figure of a character in the original trilogy, so I guess I was already a hard customer to buy over with that guy being back on the table. And you know what? After watching this episode and sitting there with my arms crossed thinking, ugh, I can't believe they brought back Boba Fett, one of the most useless characters in Star Wars, and that's saying something because Star Wars has a lot of awful characters. You know what? Yeah, I'll admit it. I stand corrected. I think Boba Fett is cool now. As a side character in this show, you know what? Yeah, man, I dig it. And of course, this episode's also where we get a lot of tension. We get a big question of who the child contacted on that Jedi Seeing Stone. And it's right after the episode ends once he gets kidnapped by those robot stormtroopers that my mind starts racing. This moment of Grogu sitting down on the Jedi Seeing Stone is rife with potential. Did he actually contact a Jedi who's willing to help him? Or maybe he contacted a Sith Lord masquerading as a Jedi. That would be an amazing setup for a great new villain next season. Then I got brought back to Earth thinking that, you know, they're probably just gonna shove another legacy character in there. Anyway, let's talk about the next episode. Oh, wait a second, before we get to episode 7, we gotta talk about Investor Day! So get this right, I'm watching The Mandalorian episode by episode, week by week as it's coming out, and every episode I'm seeing these little things and going, that feels like it's there for a spin-off. That feels like it's there for a reference. Why is Disney putting all these characters in the show? What's going on? What's the plan? So lo and behold, in comes Investor Day, the same day that episode 7 drops. And that's when they confirmed something I was suspecting this entire season. Because amongst all the other announcements of Marvel shows and all sorts of other things that they're working on right now, they announced that they are putting out not 1, not 2, not 3, but 10 brand new Star Wars series!
And a new Star Wars movie too, if you still care about those.
What? I thought we were done with Star Wars for a while, Bob Iger. What happened to that? We got Ahsoka, who was awesome, but spin-off. Check. We have the X-Wing fighter guy who showed up in like 3 episodes. Check. We've got Bo-Katan, who, she might show up in something. Hell, maybe the guy in the season premiere who was pretending to be Boba Fett might show up in the Obi-Wan series, since that's probably gonna be sent on freaking Tatooine as well.
Episode 7.
It's mostly a character development episode, and it's really well done in my opinion. We get a lot more scummy from the imps showing why we should hate them and take them more seriously as a threat to the galactic democracy that should exist in Star Wars. Hell, honestly, I think the insight that Mayfield provides on where Mando's moral compass is at this point in this series is actually really well done. Good episode. Not my favorite, but I don't have a lot of complaints. And then we get to
Episode 8.
Everything these past few episodes has explored and built up to is this final moment. Confronting Moff Gideon, saving Grogu, retrieving the Darksaber, and hopefully finding that Jedi from the Waystone. And truth be told, as I'm watching this episode, all I can think is, hey, this is going really well. I'm liking this fight against the robotic Dark Troopers, it's pretty well done. Sure, this fight is also showing how the robots aren't really the brightest, because after all, you can never really replace the improv gene humans have. But it has some pretty solid tension for a last episode, all things considered.
The Rock'em Sock'em Robots by Mark.
But then of course we get our darkest hour moment. It feels like the heroes have won, but then suddenly the Dark Troopers return. They've stormed the ship, and they're about to take down our entire platoon of heroes. And then, wait, what's that on the security camera footage? Huh, a lone X-Wing fighter. And the second I saw that, I knew instantly, bro, they brought back Luke Skywalker. They brought back Luke Skywalker. They just cannot hop off of that Skywalker dick. Alright, I've been complaining for a solid amount of time this video, so overall, do I think that Season 2 of Mandalorian is a stinky pile of tauntaun guts like the title suggests? Well, not entirely. The quality of the show is overall comparable to the first season, all things considered. It's not like the show suddenly dropped off in quality, we're nowhere near seasonal rot phase in the show. However, I think it's clear that the writing of this season was hindered by producing a goal that didn't slot well with the pre-existing formula set by Season 1. And that isn't helped by the fact the higher-ups at Disney probably felt the need to shoehorn in these references and tie-ins to future spin-off projects for a Star Wars expanded cinematic universe. So truthfully, those are the main reasons I don't like Season 2 as much as I liked Season 1. And furthermore, with the return of Luke and Boba Fett in Season 2 of The Mandalorian, the fans are once again at each other's throats, arguing which appearances of which legacy characters are best. Good job, Disney, you've brought back all the toxicity that modern Star Wars fandom is known for. All you had to do was not put legacy characters in the series, and what did you do? You filled it to the brim with legacy characters. As many as you could fit in there. As many tie-ins as possible. Then you just grabbed the new, fresh characters that people have fallen in love with, and you pushed them off a cliff with the whisper of "Long live the King." And just to rub in the fact that we're pushing our new Star Wars characters to the side for legacy content, we get a post-credit scene for The Book of Boba Fett. The new characters, the different locations, the fresh perspective on the world of Star Wars, it all feels like it was a lure. A light dangling inches away from the jaws of an anglerfish named corporatism. After the first season of The Mandalorian, I was hopeful for a new direction for Star Wars. I was looking forward to Star Wars content that explored the far reaches of a near infinite galaxy that could continue being fresh and fun instead of orbiting these same 4 damn bloodlines over and over and over again. Like, does no one else get tired of this? Does anyone else want to see more than just people related to these 4 freaking characters? Right when I thought Disney was about to start doing Star Wars right, I get proven wrong by the damn people in charge. At the start of this video, I said that Star Wars is something special to everyone, and it should go without saying that it's something different for everyone too. When I look at Star Wars, I see a universe that has infinite potential. It's a setting that borrows elements from many iconic settings and genres, from westerns and Edo Japan, to high fantasy, World War II, science fiction, and pulp serials, wrapping them in a setting that is both futuristic and ancient at the same time. Star Wars is a truly timeless setting where nearly anything can happen without breaking the confines of this universe. And there's very few settings that can boast that kind of versatility. It's because of this that I find the recycling of legacy content to be especially lazy. This is a world that has infinite potential. Why should we keep orbiting the same handful of ideas? Now granted, I believe there's no such thing as a truly original work. I believe that everyone is inspired by the work of another artist. After all, New Hope is just a remake of The Hidden Fortress that indulged in Lucas's love for the hero's journey, and that's perfectly fine. In fact, it made a damn good movie. And obviously, there are plot structures and story beats that fit naturally together. I'm not suggesting that Star Wars becomes some abrasive, avant-garde art performance that leaves audiences baffled and traumatized. I just have to ask, how many more times do we have to see a character like Luke Skywalker or Darth Vader before we let a new character become as iconic as those classic figures? Now, I would argue that Mando has quickly risen through the ranks to become a pop culture icon, but evidently he can't escape the shadow of those legacy characters even within his own show. Let's not forget that The Mandalorian wasn't always intended to have next to no connections to the main Star Wars saga. Following the Disney acquisition of Star Wars, I'm pretty sure we were supposed to get a Boba Fett spin-off movie, slated alongside an Obi-Wan Kenobi spin-off movie.
Now doesn't that sound familiar?
Thankfully, shuffling behind the scenes made those original plans fall through, and we got the show we now know and love. A show which benefited from a clean slate, allowing the creators to run wild and build new narratives, new locations, and new characters from the ground up. If they had gone with those original plans for a Boba Fett movie, there's no way the writers could have had the same amount of liberty they had while working on The Mandalorian. I mean, think about it. You couldn't just concoct Mando's tragic backstory and character growth and put it on Boba Fett. He's already got a tragic backstory that we saw in the prequels, and it was so lame. And while I have no insights on how much those original plans for a Boba Fett spin-off movie made it into the Book of Boba Fett, I find it very convenient that Lucasfilm used Season 2 of The Mandalorian to effectively reboot the character just in time to give him a brand new show. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Season 3 doubled down on all the fan service and spin-off bait presented in Season 2, and if that does happen, it will not benefit The Mandalorian as a standalone series. And this issue runs deep within Star Wars. How many more stories are going to revolve around destroying Death Star tech before we get a new threat? How many more times are we going to circle around these same basic themes of a black and white, good versus evil narrative without trying to develop them any further? How many more characters will be introduced for the sole reason of advertising a spin-off? How many more legacy characters will steal the spotlight from the next generation of Star Wars heroes? Where does it end? Do we want Star Wars to be a franchise where any story can feel fresh thanks to new, interesting characters and locations? Where themes and ideas are allowed to evolve and develop beyond a basic level? Or are we going to continue marching in circles, closing in on the toy aisle on the hunt for a new action figure based on the same types of patterns and the same types of shapes, all different in name and label, but familiar on a subconscious level? There's a fine line to balance between a well-crafted story inspired by past epics and a pointless rehash capitalizing on nostalgia. But I guess that Star Wars is such an old IP at this point that to many, that line just doesn't matter anymore. Because at the end of the day, we all know the truth about the Star Wars series.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme, every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one. Hopefully it'll work.